What is the scariest thing you've ever seen while driving at night? I was on I-70 in Colorado going towards Utah. Pulled over at a gas station at 8 p.m. Fueling up, I noticed a couple of attractive women pumping gas. On the other side of the pump was a man in his late 40s, just staring at these young women without notice of anything else going on around him. I walk inside to go grab some food for the next few hours of driving. When I come out, I see both the younger women's car and the older man's truck are gone. I decided to hang out at the gas station for the next hour to catch a little sleep before hitting the road again. After driving for a few hours, I was speeding heavy. I pull over at yet another gas station. The young women are there getting gas and eating some food on a picnic table. Looked like they had been there for a while. I didn't see any sign of the man in the truck, but can't say I was looking very hard for it. Well, here is where it got creepy as hell. Can't say I didn't stare at them a bit. I mean, they were good looking women. As I am watching them leave, I see in the next parking lot over some headlights turn on, and it's the same man as before. He leaves when the women leave once again. Okay, that's a bit weird, but could just be a coincidence as there weren't many places to pull over. I leave a few minutes later and catch up to them. Now this guy is riding their ass with his high beams on. I decided to slow down and stay a distance behind the truck. 10 minutes or so later, the women pull over once again to most likely get this guy off their ass. With a sign of relief, the truck keeps going and I continue on my way. About 1 mile down the road, the guy just pulls off to the side of the highway. So I pull off a mile or so down the road again. Sure enough, the women drive by and the guy is still following them. At this point, we are out in the middle of nowhere and too many coincidences have happened. I called the cops to alert them, and about 15 minutes the cops pulled the guy over. I could have just seen too many horror movies that started like this and overreacted, but ya never know. Better safe than sorry. I was driving on the expressway around 2 a.m. and a semi hit a car and it went into the median. The car basically folded into itself and was beyond smashed. I can't imagine that person survived. It was incredibly sad and terrifying to see. I was driving home late one night and was driving on a dark stretch of the highway. Suddenly a body was in front of me. I tried to swerve out of the way, but it was too late. My bumper was hanging on the ground. The guy died. And I went to a nearby gas station not knowing what to do. Was 18. When the tow truck pulled my car up onto it, there were a bunch of blood and guts on the bottom. I couldn't get that image out of my head. Apparently a drunk driver with 5 DWIs had hit a guy on the motorcycle prior. For years after, I had serious depression and thought about it every night before sleep. A dead, butchered horse laying in the road. Someone had completely skinned and butchered a horse, took the choice pieces of meat, and just dumped it on the highway. I almost crashed into it. A 6-foot kangaroo standing in the middle of a pitch black road at 3 a.m. in the morning. Missed it by a bee's D. I slammed the brakes once because I saw deer in my peripheral vision. Upon closer inspection, it was a mounted deer head on a stick in the middle of the woods. Slammed the gas after I realized that. I used to deliver pizza and often had deliveries right at midnight when we closed. One time, late at night, I'm driving back to the store through a small neighborhood. Ahead I see something. It's perfectly spherical, bright shiny thing, just hovering about 6 feet off the ground, not moving at all. I pull up very slowly. Still doesn't move. Still can't comprehend what I'm looking at. Just this shiny hovering orb in the road at midnight. At this point my curiosity has overridden my fear. I'm the guy in the horror movie who dies first because I just gotta know. Either I die or I get a cool story, right? So I hop out of the car and slowly walk up to it. I'm right in front of it and still can't understand what I'm seeing. So I reach out and touch it. It's a balloon. One of those foil birthday balloons with the streetlights shining on it, making it look weird out of context in the middle of the night on an empty road. I was following a grey Toyota Tundra in a massive blizzard through Montana on McDonald Pass. He was going pretty quick most of the way, but must have been unfamiliar with how steep the final few miles are. He got away from me as I slowed down to about 35. Not 5 minutes later I passed his tire marks in the fresh snow that went off the side of the mountain. Pulled over and looked down to see his truck upside down and on fire about 300 yards down. Called 911. He didn't die but was burnt up pretty bad. Sad and scary, and don't go 50 in the snow just because you have a truck or 4WD. Frogs. Ducking. Everywhere. Like hundreds of frogs all over the road. Dad was driving at night, and I was looking out the window and saw 2 red pinpricks in the cornfield, and it followed us. I told my dad about it and he said, in the most calm, casual tone for this situation, "Those are cornfield demons. Stay in the car and you'll be okay." Cue me freaking the hell out when he got out of the car not too long after to check a tire before getting back in. I'm still not sure if that was an actual thing or if he was using a situation to his advantage to teach me to not do anything stupid like that at night. Either ways, it worked, and I still have no idea what those 2 pinpricks were. Edit, because you guys have no freaking idea what a pinprick is and cannot garner context from the rest of the passage. 351 divided by 2 images percent 2 5% 2fp0 divided by 2f2k percent 2f99 divided by 2fp0 2k99 rng gandex equals 351 and x equals 624 and k equals animals plus with plus glowing plus ice and selected index equals 0 and ajaxist equals 0 and equals 0 and im equals 1. A lonely abandoned shack with a bunch of arrows pointing to it, saying come in. Edit. To answer some questions, I was on my way to Texas to see family and the GPS took us down a back road. My mom and I joked that it was a 6 Duncan. A hitchhiker almost leaping out in front of my car on a dark forest road late at night. The woman literally popped out of nowhere. Had to drift into the oncoming lane. Luckily there was no one else and painted median there. Read a police report that she ended up getting hit minutes after I drove by. She was intoxicated and running from the police. Pretty ducking creepy. I hope she's alright. I can't imagine what the driver that hit her was thinking. Driving to work at 4:30 AM and seeing a cyclist with his head split open and brains on the road. Killer clown on the side of a deserted country road during the 2016 clonepocalypse. I think I cried. I was fetching someone from his workplace. Had to go through some fields, and some parts of the road were dark. I saw a thin, long object, wiggling at an upright position at the side of the road in front of me. Totally freaked me out. I thought I was finally experiencing something extraordinary. As I got closer I realized it was a tail of a cow. It must have escaped from some field and was hanging around at the side of the road. The cow itself was black, the tail slightly lighter in color. That's why I only saw the tail moving first without seeing the whole cow first. A closed Waffle House. A body in the ditch. Thought it was a deer as I approached and then my brain was like, deer don't wear boots. I was shaking as I did the U-turn to make sure the person was alive. They were. Just drunk and some people stopped as well and emergency was called. I was so shaken up by it. Edit. Wow, can't believe the upvotes. Thanks. I was a very young woman driving home after clubbing. About 2 AM through Hollywood. I was pulling up to a stop sign on Cahuenga, about 3 blocks from Hollywood Boulevard, when a bunch of guys begin to casually stroll onto the crosswalk, coming from both sides. I hit the gas and ran the stop sign without even thinking. They cursed and ran after me, but those boys were ready to jack me. My instincts took over before I even realized what was happening. Someone I knew locally came across a Jeep that had just crashed into the ditch on a highway at night. Flipped on its top, wheels still turning kind of thing. He was the first on scene, so called 911, and ran down into the ditch. The driver, who was badly mangled, had been tossed from the car and was dying. This guy held him and the driver died in his arms. The weirdest part of it all was that he found out the next day that it was his cousin, but he hadn't been able to recognize him. I got off on my exit, and the whole road was covered in blood. I put on my brights and saw a bisected body of a large animal. It just made me so sad. Oh, I've got the perfect thing. Driving home one night from my fiance's house. Normal night on the Florida highway. It's pretty dark. Not too many lights. Cruising at around 75 headed over a slight hill. Just big enough that you can't see the other side. Get to the top and start making my way down the hill. and very suddenly in my headlight view I get a giant construction vehicle with all of its lights turned off and parked in the left lane of the highway. I really, seriously, pray to God that no one hit that parked construction vehicle. It was one of the ones that digs up dirt, I think, on the highway that day. I very narrowly avoided smacking right into the back of that thing. I don't know how the Cherokee I was driving at the time handled the sharp turn I made into the right lane to avoid the vehicle. Needless to say, I was very nearly dead. Immediately called Florida Highway Patrol and told them about it. I hope they got to it before someone got hurt. And I really hope someone at that construction company lost their job, because they could have killed multiple people. I dropped my GF off the night we saw the Mothman Prophecies. It wasn't a super scary movie, but it had some scares. I take the interstate home. On the way, there is a curve where there aren't any lights, just a dark stretch of interstate. As I came around the bend, there was a guy in a black trench coat walking along the side of the road. As it was about 3 AM, I guess I started him. So, when my headlights hit him, he whipped around and I swear he stared me right in the eyes. My heart jumped into my throat. The whole event lasted maybe 2 seconds tops, but it had my heart racing. Not paranormal, but definitely scary for me. Not sure if this will count, but here we go. Back in my 20s I was putting myself through uni by working night shifts at a factory. Money was great, but between full-time work and full-time study I was constantly exhausted. Sleep got worse when I picked up a second job to make ends meet. Parents split up and dad went into depression, so he wasn't working, you see. Anyway, after months I kept falling asleep at the wheel on the way home from work just before dawn around 4 AM. One time as I was driving home all alone after work, I saw half a dozen crocodiles on the road. I swerved to avoid hitting them and almost crashed the car. I was terrified in the moment because they came out of nowhere and were huge, and I'd never seen crocodiles in real life before, let alone on a freeway. I pulled over the car and looked in my rearview mirror, but nothing was there. To this day I don't know if I dreamed those crocodiles or if they were a hallucination from sleep deprivation. Scariest thing I've ever seen, and I'm so thankful no one was on the road at the time too. I drove taxi during the night shift, and among many crazy and terrifying things, I saw a toddler, 2-3 years. It was about 1 AM and I was driving in a very wooded part of our town, just after dropping a customer off, and in the middle of the road was this baby just sitting in the dark. I stopped my cab and turned on my flashers. I proceeded to walk up to the kid and he just started bawling. I tried to comfort him, but me being in disbelief that a baby with no one around was just sitting there, all I could say was it's cool bro. I picked him up and he started crying frantically. I would too if a stranger came and grabbed me. I put him in the passenger seat and looked for the nearest driveway. It ended up being about 100 yards down the street. I pulled up into what I hoped was his house, and there was maybe 6 or 7 teenagers drinking in the garage. I couldn't see from the road because all the houses had long dirt driveways. When I pulled up they acted as if I wasn't even there until I said, "Hey, this your kid?" After a few watts, they came over to the cab and said, "Aiden, where did you go?" Like the baby just goes for midnight strolls. Not a thank you or goodbye or anything. They just took the baby in the house and continued drinking and laughing. As I pulled out I felt as if I should call the cops or something, but couldn't bring myself to do it. I'm still scared to this day that I'll be driving down a dark road and hit a baby. An arsehole overtaking a petrol tanker around a blind corner, coming my way, scared the shit out of me. Driving down a 2-lane divided highway, I came up to a couple semis and went into the left lane to pass. I did a shoulder check to get back into the right lane when I saw headlights in front of me. In my lane, the car was going the wrong way. I managed to swerve into the ditch. Felt like I was mere centimeters from death. Thought my wife's scream would be the last thing I ever hear, and I never want to hear it again. The semis I passed all pulled to the shoulder to come check on us. Didn't see the car anywhere. I think they just kept going. Had to pull into a gas station after and collect myself. Edit, rephrase to make less confusing. I told this story before, but one time I was driving with my girlfriend through Wisconsin on the way back home. It was really late, like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I stopped at a gas station to fill up. My GPS ended up putting me on a small highway instead of the expressway right away after leaving there. But I didn't want to complicate things more, so I just followed it. My girlfriend was sleeping, so I had the radio off and drove in silence on this really dark, creepy highway. There were deer crossing signs, so I was driving extra cautious because a family friend had recently hit a deer in their truck, which did quite a number on it and also caused her to break her arm from the impact. I saw there was a pretty sharp curve coming up, so I slowed down to make it carefully, and as I'm turning I see a figure exiting the darkness of woods. It's a large mountain lion, with blood stained all over the front of its face. Scared the duck out of me, I pulled up just after the turn and tried to wake my girlfriend up. I could see its large shadow make its way across the road in my rearview mirror, but by the time my girlfriend woke up it was gone. She had lived in Wisconsin most of her life and immediately dismissed my claims that it was a mountain lion because they are not really from that area. I told her I know what I saw, but she insisted that I was seeing things. I acted like she was probably right and continued the trip back, but I know what I saw. A lot of people that drive for a living or have done balls to the wall cross-country drives can tell you about the running shadows. First time I saw them I was on the tail end of 12 straight hours of driving. I was driving through the middle of nowhere, in the desert, at night. Very little light from the sky, no man-made lights even on the horizon. Just the pitiful cone from my truck's headlamp. And being in the middle of the desert it pretty much only lights up the road ahead. Nothing above ground level to catch the light. As I'm barreling along I start to see shadowy figures running alongside my truck out of the corners of my eyes. On two legs and four. All I can think about is the creepy stories you read online about it that lives out in the desert. Or the Asian ghost stories where if you don't acknowledge the spirit it can't harm you. So I've got my eyes glued to the road, refusing to let them flicker off to the side. I rolled my windows up and cranked up the volume on my radio. Drove like that for probably an hour and a half until they slowly petered out roughly 15 minutes outside of a little one-light town. I've had people try to carjack me, people try to rob me after I pull over to render aid, people jump out at me on twisty mountain road, you name it, but nothing matching that level of fear the first time I saw them. Felt like my spine was rippling like a ribbon in a wind trying to jump clear out of my back and hide under the seat. Sleep deprivation mixed with sensory deprivation does some strange things. Scariest and funniest at the same time. I was working at a restaurant as a cook. We did full menu till 11 PM, then absent burgers till 1 AM. I tended to pull the solo night shift, because I would walk out the door at 1:05 AM and the kitchen was stocked, clean, and perfect. It was a long night. Stupid fuck kept sending back food orders after 1 AM. I didn't leave till 2 AM. 30-minute drive home, and I was exceptionally tired. I lived in the boonies of Wisconsin. At the time, a good 5 kilometers outside of town, which was 500 people, 2 churches, and 9 bars. I hit the little 24/7 truck stop just at the edge of that town for some munchies and smokes, and made the final trek home. Encountering deer was not uncommon out there, so I was going slow, when what appeared before me, to my tired eyes, was a monster. It had a huge, round body, this crazy long neck, a pointy head, and only 2 legs, right in the middle of the road. Scared the ever-loving duck out of me in that state. Thankfully, it stood there for a second. Brain re-engaged. It's an ostrich. Okay, not a monster. Heck, just an. What the duck is an ostrich doing wandering around in central Wisconsin? I looked at it. It looked at me. I blinked. Nope. Still there. Pretty sure it's real. Finally, it trundled off into the forest. What? I grabbed my cell phone and called the tiny little police station in town. Non-emergency number. So, I'm really tired. So please laugh at me and tell me to go home and sleep and ignore the call. But I'm pretty sure I just saw an ostrich on Highway XX just outside $town. She started laughing hysterically, then assured me that, no, I'm not hallucinating. There's an ostrich and emu farm on the other side of town. Guy raises them for the kitsch places in town for meat. Some drunk driver felt that turns are for pussies. Went up, over the berm, through the fence, and through most of the barn. There's still 4 animals, including the one I just spotted. Unaccounted for. Where are you exactly? And which way did it go so we can round it up? I gave her the info, finished the last few miles home, and died in bed. Wild night, man. A ducking owl standing on the carcass of a large buck in the mountains at 3 to 5 am. All you see as you approach are two glowing red orbs, then slowly becomes huge dark form standing on the edge of the road with eyes of fire. Then you get close enough and this massive ducking owl just gives you the death stare as you go past. You realize it was just a large ass owl standing on the remains of fresh roadkill. Freaked me out for the rest of the dark part of the drive. Edit. Changed corpse to carcass because a couple cunts can't accept the interchangeability of the English language. Driving down country highways late at night and seeing coyotes just standing on the side of the road can be pretty unnerving. Was vacationing in Newfoundland, and we ended up leaving dinner kind of late en route to our stop for the evening. Was hoping to make it before dusk, but had to drive about 30 minutes in the twilight. Nothing scarier than coming around a corner in the road and seeing a moose standing on the shoulder right next to the car, and realizing it almost ended your life. 3 am on a lonely road and I was the passenger. An old man only wearing a bra, panties and high heels was casually walking down the road. My friend who was driving didn't believe me and went back around. Sure enough, he saw him and we were like WTF. Not me but a friend. After dropping me off at my house around 2 am, my friend calls me and tells me to pick my doors. He said he saw a man standing in the middle of the road and that as he passed him the man kept staring through him. Not at him really, but like there was something behind him in his back seat. He also said he could barely make out anything about the man other than his large eyes and trench coat. What really terrified me is that this happened on a street that only my family lives on and no one would have been out that night. Also we're a solid 1.5 miles from the nearest neighbor. Freaked me the hell out. Edit. Lock not pick. Night shift. Driving home. Child right in the middle of the street. Noped out of there because I watched those car hijacks. Took twice as long to get home though. Edit. I did call the cops and they caught the guys mid-act. Husband, wife and a child. Only reason I was informed by this is because my police bud. I had just finished driving for Uber and was driving down the access road to my home around 3 am when I saw a body lying completely lifeless next to one of those motorized scooters. I pulled over and flagged down his buddies who were drunk and kept going without realizing their friend was lying on the ground. Ambulance arrived and took the kid away, but I never came to find out if he made it. FCK those scooters man. I was driving on a near empty freeway at midnight when I saw a weird flickering light on the freeway. It was super dark and barely any lights besides headlights, so I slowed down a bit and merged a lane over. As I passed I got a good look and it was a car absolutely destroyed and on fire. I was a little shocked and ended up driving a bit past it before I really saw what it was, and by the time I thought about pulling over it was already far behind me and a cop sped past me on the other side, so I knew they were aware of what happened. Edit. I posted this 5 years ago. Here, was driving from Atlanta GA to Lexington SC with my GF to visit my parents. I like to drive at night since there are less people on the road and I can take my time. At around 3 am or so we are making good time. I had stopped at a gas station and picked up some coffee for us and we were due in about an hour. GF was sleeping soundly and I'm listening to a quiet radio humming away. I start getting a little drowsy and take a sip. Road was just as my coffee. No cars in sight except for a spotted few on the side of the road here and there. In the distance I can make out what looks like a hitchhiker, or what I think is one, but can't really tell due to such low light. As I get closer I start to notice other things, like how the person is kinda thin and tall and completely, for the most part, apparently brown. I'm right up on this thing now, and at about 20 feet it turns around and locks eyes with me as I pass by. This was no person, and it is the most terrifying thing I have ever seen in my life. It was a deer, or I tell myself it was. I have seen deer stand on their hind legs to fight, but they still have deer posture when they do. Not only that, but I was watching this thing walk for about 30 seconds from first seeing it in the distance to passing it. The posture it had was human. Standard biped stance, arms back, chin down. But the worst part was the eyes. or lack thereof. In their place were two large black pits, almost black holish. I'll never forget the stare down it gave me. The instant I passed it I had the only panic attack I've ever had in my life. I had to wake up my GF to keep calm enough to get to an exit with a large gas station a few miles away. Like hell I was going off a ramp close to that thing. After we pulled into the station I had a complete meltdown. I started crying harder than I ever thought I could. I couldn't talk, breath, or do anything but want to curl into a ball and cry. After around 30 minutes or so, she finally gets me to calm down enough to tell her what happened. While I don't think she believed what I think I saw, she knew that I was convinced and legitimately scared to death. Every once in a blue moon I will dream about it and wake up crying or in a cold sweat, and she will tease me about it or roll over and ignore me instead of comforting me about the one thing that I've ever been terrified of. But I know what I saw, and I know it will haunt me for the rest of my life. When I first started learning to drive I was working for my dad, and one day after work he asked if I wanted to drive home. I was like alright, so I got on the highway headed for home, and while driving, I looked in the rear view and a guy on a crocket was coming up behind me. I thought nothing of it, I was sure he would pass or slow down. I look ahead again and a few moments later I hear this sound, like metal scraping against the ground. I look around and then look back into the rear view, and the bike was on its side, spinning down the highway, and behind it I could see the biker on his back, legs and arms flailing kind of like a baby on its back in a crib. Then I watched as he disappeared under the vehicle behind him. I was so freaked out driving after that I didn't want to drive for weeks following the incident, then eventually got over it. Still I can see the guy in my mind just sliding along the ground flailing about then being swallowed under another car.